Kevin Sheedy christened him the Sundance Kid. Sheed saw the Sydney coach of the day as the closest thing in football to the charismatic Robert Redford from the much-loved movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. The Kid finally rode off into the sunset at the weekend, calling time on a career as a player, coach and commentator that stretched 35 years. Is it over, Paul Roos?
Yeah, I think so. I mean...
You think so?
Well, the reason I say that is because I said the same thing last time, so people probably don't believe me. But
yeah, but you were 47 when you left Sydney.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt the lifestyle's going to change now. I mean, we'll be in town. There's probably a bit of a misconception that we're going to move to Hawaii, which is not true. I mean, I've got a place in Hawaii, and we'd like to spend more time there, October, November, December, that type of time frame. Tammy, obviously being from America, would love to spend more time with her family. So we'll set up our life around the footy season, but to be involved full time, you need to be here. Pre-seasons in November, December, January. So from a lifestyle point of view, it's definitely going to change.
Have you made any specific promises to Tammy and the boys?
Well, when we went through, going through my career, particularly more coaching, it was always a family decision. We made a family decision, sat down. The boys were really young then when we decided to coach Sydney, but it was a family decision to coach Sydney. Then it was a discussion around leaving Sydney. Then when the Melbourne thing came up, the boys were older and we all sat down. So everything we've done has been as a family. I think Tammy's enjoyed the last 3 years, but is equally looking forward to doing other things as I am. So, one door shuts, Michael, and another one opens.
So the immediate future is covering the finals for Fox Footy, and then?
Yep. Yeah, so look, I'm looking forward to, like everyone, I think I'll transition now from a coach to a fan, to a commentator to a fan. I love the game, and we've been blessed. I've been so fortunate. Who would have thought when I was a young kid growing up in Donvale that you'd spend 35 years employed in an industry you actually love being in. So, and fundamentally, we're all football supporters at heart. So to be able to just enjoy the game. And I say this with respect, often you don't enjoy the game for the purity of it when you're coaching and playing, because you're preparing, you're coaching 44 players. So to be able to sit back and enjoy it is a great stage of my life. Then we'll travel, for a couple of months back in January, and then hopefully stay involved in footy and Tammy
in a commentary role.
Yeah, hopefully in a commentary role. Tammy and I are also starting a business together, which is leadership and mindfulness, which is something that we're both passionate about as well, and trying to link the two together. So we'll get sort of stuck into that as well. So look, there's plenty of exciting things to happen.
Sheeds would say it was appropriate that you were recruited from the Beverly Hills Football Club out in the Doncaster area. What do you think he meant? Did you ever ask him what he meant when he referred to you as the Sundance Kid?
No, not really. And you and I were chatting before we got... I can't really remember the context, but I think it was one of those sort of sarcastic compliments that Sheeds often gave out. But I have a great story about Sheeds. I never forget this, and he's a great football person. When I had taken over part-time at Sydney, and back into 2002, we brought our young guys down to Melbourne for a bit of a trip just to show them what it was like to be in the heartland, and we decided to take them. So I was still fighting for the job and trying to get the job as senior coach, and brought the players down, about 10 or 11 of them. We went to Windy Hill to watch the Bombers train, and we were in the Hall of Fame, and Robert Shaw, my old coach, came down and said, "Oh, well, what are you doing, Roos?" He said, "Oh, look, we've just got the young blokes, we're going to watch you train." And Shaw invited us to come and show us the facility. So we walked up, and I was very... a big game, and, I didn't really want to step on anyone's toes, but he invited us, so we walked around. Sheeds walked out of, I think it was like a table tennis room and then a meeting room. Sheeds walked out, and I was sort of like, gee, I better be careful here, and said, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'll explain." He said, "Do you want me to talk to him?" Before I had a chance to answer, he grabbed the 10 guys, walked them in to their meeting room and spoke to them. I remember, I think it was Hurdy and Dustin Fletcher walked out, looked at me, and I said, "What do you got?" So we're supposed to have a meeting. I said, "Well, he's in here talking to our guys." I'll never forget it.
So was that during the season?
They were leading up to a final.
Yeah,
they were about to go out and train for a final. And that's how giving he was. He just loved football. I'll never forget that. It was one of the most thoughtful, selfless things that he could possibly do. He didn't need to do it, and he took these guys in there. So I have so much respect for Kevin.
Paul, you're 53, you haven't got a grey hair on your head. You said when you left Sydney that it was time, and I suspect that you feel the same way about your time at Melbourne. Is that true?
Yeah, when I started at Melbourne, Peter, I think I've said publicly a number of times, didn't paint a very rosy picture. But
Peter Jackson?
Peter Jackson. Yeah. So I understood the role, and I took it on the basis of the energy levels I felt were not conducive to a 5-year contract, a 6-year contract, and we spoke a lot about that. I felt I could restructure a footy club, and I felt I could pick a successor and teach players, what long-term success looked like, and that was really the goal from day one. So I knew there was going to be a finishing point, and that probably kept me going through because as you get older, and I had this discussion with a lot of coaches, some of the things you do, you're just not interested in doing. So you actually
What are you
need...
talking about?
Well, you need young coaches. You need guys that are prepared to sit for hours in front of the video, watch games of footy, get out, kick balls, craft sessions. Because my stage coming to Melbourne was more around the culture and what a good football club looks like, getting good people involved, teaching the way that the game should be played to have sustained success, and getting Sydney people in to do that, which was really important because I didn't have time to coach the coaches the way I want them to be coached. So Daniel McPherson, Ben Matthews, George Stone, Brett Ellison, all coming in was really important. So I think one of my good strengths is just embracing other staff. Goody coming in is so important, so much energy, so much enthusiasm. Young coach. It reminds me of myself when you first started, really.
Did you handpick Simon Goodwin?
No, there was a whole panel of us that were involved in that discussion. We had a number of people we spoke formally, informally, coffees, background checks. The first meeting was at Todd Viney's house, myself, Josh Marnie, Todd. I'd never met Goody before, to be honest, and we walked in and I walked out probably at that stage thinking that was our senior coach, just the way...
After the first meeting?
Yeah, it was. And I must admit, I went in, I don't know why, I went in thinking maybe it's, out of courtesy and, sometimes you think, we've got to give this guy an opportunity. So I was going in, I wouldn't say negative, but I was going in pretty blasé about the whole thing. And when I walked out, I knew he was going to be our senior coach.
Okay.
Yeah.
Paul, you left Sydney because it was time. You had 3 years on the couch, freshened up, and then Melbourne landed you. If you have next year out and a Collingwood or a Richmond or whoever came at you with the open chequebook, are you vulnerable or not?
As I said, I think the lifestyle change now is going to be too dramatic, in terms of we want to set ourselves up now to be able to go overseas in the off-season, to do some work on leadership and mindfulness, visit Tammy's family more. I mean, she's sacrificed so much, and I think people have been really respectful of that. I think there was a bit of a question, not from everyone, but some people, why would you only do it for 3 years? But as soon as I sort of said, well, look, hang on, I've got a wife that's been in Australia for 20, however many years it is, I think people then start to understand, well, yeah, actually, that's a fair commitment. It's a fair sacrifice.
Roos, you're going to be judged on your body of work at Melbourne, as you should be. And I think everyone thinks that the graph's going in the right direction. But it was a terrible way for you to finish. Now, you may not agree with that, but from the outside looking in, the loss to Carlton and the thrashing and the humiliation at Geelong.
Oh, I don't disagree. I'm still getting over that, and it'll probably take me a fair while to do that. But that's the normal course of a week. And then, like everyone, I think everyone generally... the thoughts of supporters or you are not dissimilar to the thoughts of a coach.
No, but this is the end for you. And I mean, you might be more pragmatic than I am about that, but this is the final chapter in your coaching career, and it finished in the worst possible way. Yeah. The heaviest loss in your career.
And I'm saying I think about it. I don't not think about that. And that's the last game that I'll ever coach. So that's, I can't change that. But there'll be a point, which is not right now, I can tell you, there'll be a point where I will look back and, we'll celebrate the win against Hawthorn and Port and Geelong and the improvement, the dramatic improvement, and the work of all the assistant coaches and the work of Nathan Jones and Jack Watts. It's not quite right yet.
No.
But it will. There's no doubt.
No,
it will.
I understand that. But what did you say to them, in essence, after the game?
Well, really, I went back to... one of the things I wrote down after 1998 when I finished playing, never say anything after a game if too emotional.
Yep.
And I wrote that down And
You've often talked about that.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot.
But this was the end. I mean,
Straight after the game, I said to Goody, look, you probably need to speak to them. So he spoke to them. And then Nathan grabbed them together and I just briefly touched on it. And I was honest. I said, guys, look, this is the time that relationships get broken. So, look, hopefully, I think I said something like, hopefully this is just part of your journey. And I thank you for your efforts. So it's really pretty simple. I'll be at the best and fairest, and there's always time to... And I think that's more appropriate because the way you're feeling after a game like that, and I've seen it many times, you say something, you can't take it back.
Correct.
So you're better just to be short and succinct and try and get out and then gather your own thoughts.
You've said previously to me that more relationships have been ruined immediately after a game than any other time.
Yeah, and that's why when I sat down as a player, I had no idea whether I'd coach or not at the end of 1998 when I retired, but I didn't ever want to forget what it was like to be a player. So I just sat down in my office and I wrote down these things that really stuck in my mind, and I've still got the document. I took it out yesterday when I cleaned out my desk. It's still there. The worst part of the week, the most destructive part of the week is after the game, because...
No one ever bagged you. You were the Sundance kid.
The bakes that we used to cop were fantastic.
What,
yeah.
From whom, Paul?
Oh, look...
Parko give you a couple?
Wolsey and Parko, and that was the way it was, Parko. And my Fitzroy mates just loved it, we played the Bulldogs and Parko would be out there, and he's told the story before as well. I think Maxie Crowe was, 38 and he kicked 4 on me at the Western Oval, and Parko, as he had a tendency to do, would get you in your sights and you'd try and duck and maybe stand behind someone and push. But as soon as he saw you, as for you, Roos, you're nothing but a loose kick-chasing, non-contact centre-half-back. And he's so passionate about... I love Park. He's so passionate about the game and his veins in his neck. And I took a couple of speckies, as he called them, and his leg pushed out. And he said, "You took one of these, no 2 of these." And it's still a source of humour amongst all the Fitzroy players. But the game's changed a lot. It was so much more emotion-based back then because there wasn't time. Like Wolsey, Parker and those guys didn't have time to show us clips of other games and strategies and all those sorts of things.
But don't sell yourself short. We've got some vision of you bucketing your blokes at the Swans. Very, very colourful language one day at 3/4 time. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it is. Look, footy's an emotional game, and
But people think you're so calm about it and you're so detached. But is that not true?
Everyone's emotional in different ways. I think what I tried to do is be calculated in sending messages, and it didn't always work out that way. I think you could never be over the top all the time because the players are so much more, when I say educated, because of the system. You're actually educating yourself and you want information and you need to know solutions. Players want solutions. They don't want to be criticised.
They don't want to be told they're hopeless, do they?
Yeah, they don't want to be told they're hopeless. They want solutions, but there's still a time, less and less now.
Does your meditation on match days, did you find, well, clearly you found that it helped, but when you finished that, say that was mid-morning presumably on a match day, your mind was clear, you were ready to address the task, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think for me it was, the meditation was really just a form of focus, clearing your mind, just preparation to get ready because it's a pretty physically and emotionally draining day. You get really tired after a game. It was funny, Goody, when he took over for the 3 games in the NAB Cup, I remember the first or second one, he said, "Geez, I'm tired," and I think people underestimate the mental energy and the emotional energy that goes into coaching on game day. So part of the meditation is really just to get yourself ready as part of your routine, so you can have some clarity of thought and clarity around. And also, part of the tool is in those emotional moments, it might be like a 30-second reminder of a meditative state when you're walking down onto the ground at 3/4 time after the game. So you it's a tool that's not just, I don't just use in a block of 20 minutes.
Yep.
I find that I'm better at it now, that I can actually, and the weekend was a really good, I think, I don't know exactly what was going through Peter Jackson's mind or Glenn Bartlett's, but you could imagine the old CEO and the old chairman would want the coach in that moment to get in and rip into the boys and all that sort of stuff. So it's in those moments where you've got to have some clarity around what your message is going to be, you know, and I think that really helps in the real high-pressure moments.
I think I know the answer to this, but I need to ask you anyway. Did you feel let down at Geelong? Did you think that the players had failed you? And it's not your footy club, I understand that, but you'd had a very strong bond with these blokes for 3 years.
I didn't ever want it to be about me. It's a hard question to answer because I take responsibility. You know, I let myself down. I can only speak for myself.
How did you let yourself down?
Well, we lost the game, you know, and we lost the game significantly. So ultimately...
But you would have sent them out there thinking that they were ready to give a good account.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, I can't, and I said this during the game, I can't get inside players' minds, you know. Look, they were shattered after the game. You know, they were really, really disappointed. And look, each and every one of them would have gone through the game in their own mind and worked out. I mean, I don't take it personally. You know, I'm disappointed for them, but equally, you know, when, as we mentioned earlier on, in the cold, hard light of the day, you know, once we get to the best and fairest next week, you know, it's going to be about, you know, the 10 wins and the improvement from 2 wins and 54% or whatever it was to, you know, to 10 wins and just below 100%. So there's been an amazing turnaround, and a lot of people have contributed to that. Not just me, and I think that's the myth about coaching. There's so many people involved in footy clubs now. If you think you're going to put a coach in a position that's going to turn around, you've got to have all your ducks aligned. And that's what's happened at Melbourne Footy Club. They've got some great people in all areas, and that's going to mean that I believe they're going to be successful in the short to medium term.
Your record from 3 years at Melbourne was 21 wins from 66 games, but you've gone 4 wins, 7 wins and 10 wins. So clearly it's travelling in the right direction. Are you satisfied with your body of work at Melbourne, you personally?
Oh, look, as I said, it's raw. The weekend's still pretty raw for me. But yeah, if I take the helicopter look at the performance, and I guess probably over the last 2 or 3 weeks, a lot of people have sort of rang me or texted me and reminded me of what it was like when we arrived. You know, because it's easy to forget that. You know, I think everyone forgets because you know you are just going forward. You're not really ever looking back. So. And I guess I get a lot of satisfaction from Melbourne people coming up and saying, look, it's just, we appreciate what you've done. Because I'm competitive and you always think you can do better. You always think you can improve on what you've done, or you could have won another game, or, you know, whatever it might be. So, look, I'd say, I think if we look back and what we originally set out to do, we've achieved that. You know, and I think, you know, but I don't often look back, but we've achieved, you know, what we wanted to achieve. And now we've put the club in a position that can sustain some success over the next 3 to 5 years.
When you looked at, when the situation arose with 2 rounds to play and there was a chance that Melbourne could play finals, what was your gut feel? There's the attraction of playing finals, but I think the realistic attitude about whether you're ready for it.
Look, my gut feel was, when is this team going to hit the wall? You know, it's a very long season. I think it's exciting for the club. I think the club needed to deal with that little period of excitement, but clearly we're not ready. You know, we're really not ready to be a finals team. You don't want to get into the finals and get belted in the first week or just sort of limp in. You know, I think we're still a really young team, and I think people forget that. The turnover of the list has been dramatic. You know, the team that's been representing pretty much, I think, once this year we've been older than our opposition. I think 13 or 14 weeks we've been the youngest team for the weekend. The talent's there to play finals. Will it be? I'm not panicking. As a Melbourne supporter, which I am now, we'll go to the footy together, Mike.
We will. I look forward to that.
I'm not panicking. I'm not panicking about Melbourne making it or not making it. They're going to be successful. I guarantee it. I can't tell Melbourne fans when it's going to be, but there's some pretty exciting times on the horizon. Will it be next year? I don't know. Will it be the year after? I would say, if I sat here, 95% certain the year after, they'll be playing finals.
The biggest name in this group you're talking about is a bloke called Jesse Hogan. Now, I would think difficult role to play, key forward in a struggling team, but I think he's been disappointing. That's my view. How good... Jonathan Brown wants you to get $15 million for 10 years.
Yep.
Is he a prodigious talent or not?
I think the problem, Mike, at the moment is the expectation on young players, even before they play the game, is dramatic. So even before they start, these guys are earmarked as superstars. It's completely unfair. The system that I came through, you'd sneak into the team and then all of a sudden, Paul Roos got a first game. Who's he? Oh, you saw him playing the under-19.
Yep.
No one would know who you are. So, and I respect Brownie and all the guys that commentate on footy, but then the expectation gets loaded through all the programs and, whether it be radio, TV or whatever. So the expectation on players is ridiculous now in terms of Jesse's really a second-year player. He's a second-year centre-half forward, which is the toughest role to play in football. So I think if you look at him from that point of view, then you look at him completely different to the $15 million player that Brownie
Sure.
wants him to be.
Let's project forward. He's had 2 years. Let's go 2 years forward.
Yep.
Will he be playing for Melbourne, and will he be able to kick set shots for goal?
Well, I think with guys like Jesse, the club can only do so much because they're interstate players, So it's not going to be a case of Jesse leaving the club because he doesn't believe in the club where it's going, and he doesn't. Him and Simon have got a great relationship. He's got a great relationship with players. The question I can't answer is where does he want his life to be? He's a Melbourne person, and there's no signs at this particular stage of him leaving the Melbourne Football Club.
Okay.
In terms of his goal kicking, look, it's a work in progress. As a lot of the key for Tommy Hawkins, Buddy Franklin, a lot of them, because again, jumping up onto a big stage. Josh Kennedy from West Coast, he's a two-time now a Coleman medalist on the back of a lot of criticism. 4 or 5 years ago or whenever he started. So I think a lot of it is around the comfort levels of playing on the big stage, kicking big goals, where the team's at, how many opportunities you get and all those sorts of things.
The bye. I think it's a nonsensical idea for what it's worth.
Yeah, the coaches were, as one, couldn't believe, don't understand it, illogical. It certainly takes away. I think that was the feeling from the coaches. If you finish top 4 and you win the first week and you get that rest, there's no advantage now. It's actually a disadvantage in a sense.
Because you've got one game in 20-odd days.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was the consensus. You've worked hard all year to get that advantage and it's taken away from you.
So when you went to Gillen's for dinner and obviously raised this issue, what was the explanation?
I think it was around about, the teams dropping players for the last game of the season, and resting them. So they're saying, we'll rest you the following week. I think the coach's feedback was, well, shouldn't the coaches just worry about their team and look after their team? And if players are rested, then I would think the members' expectation is, if you're a finals team, to set your team up to be a finals team.
Agreed.
It shouldn't be legislated by the AFL.
September's the campaign, isn't it?
September's the campaign. Yeah. So I don't know why you'd put a bye weekend in, which potentially hurts the teams that have been the best teams in the competition all year, the one and two team or 3 and 4. So you put a bye weekend that potentially takes away from the teams that's been the best performed teams during the year, really. So Leo Barry drops that mark. Ironically, we probably were attacking in 2006 and could have won the 06 and we were defending in 2005. So there has to be a modicum of just the games gets played out the way the game gets played out. I've talked to Rossi about this all the time. I said, mate, the only difference between you and I is a bounce of the ball. And that's how Nick Davis kicks that amazing goal in the semi-final, gets us to a prelim. He doesn't kick that goal. We're not even in a grand final. Yeah. And that's how fine line it is between winning and losing when you get to that point.
Roosy, when you went to the microphone at the MCG 2005 and yelled, "Here it is," was that the pinnacle of your career?
Yeah, it was, definitely. To take so long to do it. Great times at Fitzroy, fortunate to go to Sydney, played in a grand final in 96, lost it. And to coach, the first premiership in 72 years. To see the impact on the faces of all the people that had put money into all the guys on the ground, Paul Kelly as well. The amount
Barry
of
Round, Bobby Skill.
Yeah, all the ex-players, all the guys that put money into the footy club. It was just an amazing moment. My wife and boys were on the ground, and I think the AFL went to...
Did you cry?
Did I cry?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I can't really remember, to be honest. Certainly not on the ground, but But my boys were on the ground. They got in the team photo. I don't think the AFL was that happy about that. So that's how to black them out. But yeah, look, it's the pinnacle of playing football, and it's hard to put into emotion what that day is actually really like.
Let's go to an old wound here. 2005, you play 4 finals. You kick 40 goals in 4 finals.
Yep.
You know where I'm going here.
Yeah,
I'm going to remind you about a comment made by the then CEO of the AFL, Andrew Demetriou, about your style of football. You didn't like that, did you?
I thought it was strange. I mean, I think as an industry, we should all be supporting each other, you know, as in, particularly being an interstate club. You know, we're an interstate club that's flying the flag, you know, for football in New South Wales. And I think there's also a difference between playing poorly and a game style that doesn't stack up. We were, I think, a reasonably talented team without being, you know, a West Coast Eagles type midfield. And our guys are really honest. I think Kirky called them the Cortinas versus the Lamborghinis or whatever he called them. So we knew what we were as a football club and how we needed to play to win games of football. Our players were really, really clear on that. So there's a difference between playing, you know, poorly and an inability. But I just thought it was a strange comment. It was a much bigger issue in Melbourne than it was.
Was it?
Yeah, that it was in Sydney.
Well, it was a big enough issue for you, Paul, to boycott
Yeah.
Andrew Demetriou's appearance at the Sydney Football Club just after the grand final.
No. What happened was they'd actually asked me to do a talk for the AFL midway through the year, just after his comments, and I said, well, if that's the way he thinks about it, well, why would I go and talk to the AFL?
Okay, so it was during
the season.
Okay.
Well, why would I go and speak to the AFL? If that's the way the CEO sees me and us as a footy club, why would I go and give a lecture to the AFL people? So I just said to, I think Miles Barron-Hay and Andrew Island, I said, well, I don't see any point in me being there. I mean, there's not a lot of sort of respect or love coming the other way. So it was in season.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you square it up with Andrew?
We spoke, again, timeline is pretty hard to remember. But yeah, look, he came up and we spoke about it. Might have been post-season, I can't remember, or even towards the end of the season. But we spoke about it.
You and I did an open mic 6 or 7 years ago. 2 of the things you said there, and the direct quote was, we've played some terrible games of football. But then you went on to say, footy clubs don't hire coaches to play pretty football, they hire them to win games.
Yeah, look, I firmly believe that. The misconception is, you know, we manipulate the rules and we just play the game with all the rule changes under the rules. You know, and however the rules are, and whatever the personnel is, and whatever you think can win at that particular time. I don't think correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure coaches ever got re-employed because the game
played pretty footy.
I don't think that's ever happened.
No, true. Well, all right, let's fast forward to next year, and you're in the Fox Footy commentary team, and there's an abysmal game on in front of you. Will you criticise the standard of the game and the way that the game plan of the coaches involved? Yeah,
but I reckon what has got lost in this whole process, and I've said this many times, there's this massive misconception that 30 years ago we'd go to the football and there was these 6 great games every weekend at 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, and the ball was going up and down and everyone was taking these high... I played.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, that's not the case.
Okay.
You know, every game is televised now. Every game is scrutinised. Back then, what did you see on Saturday night? Carlton's premiership third quarter, where they kicked 10 goals. That's the only game you used to see. One quarter of football on a Saturday night. And, you know, you would write about the games and et cetera, et cetera. So my point being, I don't care whether you change 100 more rules. There's going to be bad games of footy next year. There'll be bad games in 100 years.
You're a very logical man, Paul.
Yeah, that's just the nature of our game.
Let me take you back to 2005. Do you know the game where you coached the Swans to the flag and enjoyed your first premiership was your 440th game as a player and coach?
No, I wouldn't have known that.
No one's had to wait that long.
Yeah, look, and I think that's probably, again, probably because I've had to wait so long, it gives you a much greater appreciation of how difficult it is. And I remember, you know, guys like Jonathan Brown, and you always hear them talking about, I just thought it sort of happened. Yeah. It was going to keep on happening. And they get to the back end of their career and they sort of think, gee, this wasn't meant to be the case. So look, everyone will have different recollections of their premiership, but I think having played for so long and then played in the grand final in '96 and not winning it, and then coaching one, I understand how difficult they are, and that's why I've so much respect and also empathy for Rossi. I mean, Rossi and I are great mates, but I understand how difficult they are to win. I think, again, with all the coverage now in all the media, you know, what's the first thing that when a coach is under pressure? Let's sack the coach. Let's rebuild. Let's dissect the list. You know, I haven't seen. I don't know what you've seen. You might have it under your desk somewhere. Show me this blueprint to win a premiership. There's this misconception that's driven largely by the media that there's this blueprint about winning a premiership.
The blueprint has 25 very good players in it, doesn't it?
Well, the blueprint is, to me, is get good people in your footy club, try and get a game plan that's sustainable and pick your best team every single week. And at the end of the year, turn your players over and get your best list for the following year. That's the only blueprint that I know.
Paul, did you get greater satisfaction or joy out of playing or coaching?
Yeah, that's one of your better questions.
Thanks, mate. I mean, it's taken me 40 minutes.
No, well done for that. I think the coaching a premiership was the best day of my footy life. So if that answers your question, it's sort of hard to be specific. As a player, you want to be part of the team, and I've said this to Melbourne players, but you've got a responsibility yourself as well. You don't want to be a selfish player, but ultimately I'm responsible for me, and I have to prepare myself to be a really, really good player. So there's a sense of selfishness in that. As a coach, there's no selfishness. If you want to be a good coach, you can't have any selfishness about being a coach, because you've got to actually manage 44 players and make 44 players the best, and then you've got to pull them together, and then you've got to try and work out how they play well, and you've got to sell a story to them, etc., etc. So, you know, I think I learned off some great Fitzroy players, and I think I was able to prepare myself. If I look back, I probably was times when I was selfish as a player, you know, and I wish I could have my time over again.
Really, do you?
Yeah, I think so, because particularly when you're going through some... I'd love to have coached before I played.
Yeah.
You know, because you have a greater understanding of what a coach is going through and what...
And the team ethic.
And the team and what your team's expecting of you. So coaching is far harder than playing, no question.
You were an icon at Fitzroy, but it didn't end as well as it started. I mean, you were a kid, and as you said before, coming in, you play with any club that picks you, but you've had a celebrated career at Fitzroy, and one of your famous quotes to me was, you said, the club I left wasn't the club I joined. You'd fallen out of love with Fitzroy, hadn't you?
Yeah, it was so different. You know, look, I'm so lucky when I look back on my career now. I owe such a gratitude debt to Gary Wilson and Bernie Quinlan and Laurie Serafini and Mickey Conlon and all those guys that taught me how to be a footballer, how to prepare, how to be great on the field, off the field, how to be a good person. They were terrific people. And then when I look at the end of Fitzroy, it was just such a different footy club. You know, I was captain, I felt like it wasn't my club. I felt like, I remember Rossi and we used to go to this gelati shop in Lygon Street or whatever it was after games, and we'd sort of sit there, you know, with our wives, girlfriends at the time. Gee, what is this footy club? Lynchy had gone, Johnny Blakey had gone, Purdy had gone. You know,
This is early 90s we're talking here.
Yeah, so I left at the end of 94.
Yep.
You know, Lynchy left at the end of 93. And I remember saying to him, he came and I could tell how torn he was. I said, mate, you know what, if I was you, I'd go. I said, this club is not...
You said to Lynchy?
I told him to leave, yeah. And I say that because, yeah, he was really torn. I said, mate, you could just see the club was just...
It was in its death throes,
Yeah, it was in its death throes. Yeah. And I would have loved to have been a one-club player, and that was one of my goals. Yeah, when I first started Fitzroy, I'd have loved to be able to do that, but it just didn't work out that way.
Paul, how wounded were you at the end of 1990? Correct me if I'm wrong here. You're in the States on a holiday. Someone delivers the message that Fitzroy want to cut your pay by 30% and are prepared to trade you to Collingwood. Is that true?
Yeah, it's true. I got a phone call from Damien Smith, who was managing me, and he rang and said, look, they want you to take a 33% pay cut, or they'll trade you. and Collingwood have already agreed. So it was almost like, okay, so what you're really telling me is they want to get rid of me. Yeah, that was basically.
You were the captain and the best
I was
and
the
fairest
captain.
winner.
Yeah, I was the captain of the footy club, and so the Collingwood people rang me. I ended up flying back to do the trade. No one from Fitzroy rang me at any stage. Collingwood couldn't get any of their players to go to Fitzroy. Trade finished. I actually rang Fitzroy. No one from Fitzroy rang me. I rang, and I said, "Look, what do you want me to do?" And they said, "Oh no, we're going to honour your contract now." And so I jumped on a plane, went back to America.
Did you?
Yeah.
This is not a question. This is a statement. You had to be insulted by that.
I resigned as captain.
Yeah.
Yeah. I sent a.
You resigned as captain and stayed as a player.
Stayed as a player, resigned as captain, and that was the year Ozzy was captain. I think Shorey came in as coach. I think it was his first year as coach from memory. So yeah, I was insulted. I was devastated.
So you leave after the 1994 season, 2 years before the club goes under.
Yeah, it was really hard. I remember being at the front of my house in North Carlton, and the lady come up after I'd made the decision to go, and she was devastated. I said, look, it's a hard decision. I felt for all the fans. I mean, the Fitzroy fans, a number of times they rattled tins and, raised money and et cetera, and I don't know if this is a story I've ever told, but I got a phone call. I can't remember the guy's name, and I'd made the decision to go, and he rang me up, and look, there were some great people at Fitzroy, and there was always someone that would bob up out of nowhere and sort of think they could do something, and they were honourable, all honourable people. So I can't remember the fellow's name, but he rang me up. He said, "Look, Paul, we want you to stay." I said, "Look, I just can't see a future for the footy club." And he said, "Well, can you come and chat to me?" I said, "Look, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you two tasks." I won the best and fairest that year, got up on stage, and they didn't have a medal. They said to me, "Can you give this one back?" And I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well, I want you to get my best and fairest medal. So if you can get my best and fairest medal, and I want you to prove," because he said, "Look, financially we're going to be fine." I said, "Okay." And in those days you got paid, I think, March, July, December. So I said, "I'll tell you what I want you to do. I want you to get my December payment brought forward. So if you can show me they're financially sound and you can give me my best and fairest medal, then I'll sit down and we'll have a chat." So we met at this cafe in Mitcham, I think it was. And I could tell by the look on his face, and sat down. He said, "Oh, look, Paul, I'm sorry, I can't get you a medal and I can't bring you money forward, And I didn't get the best and fairest medal until my dad was ringing up, and probably 6-8 months later.
So could they not afford the medal, or they just couldn't be bothered?
I don't think they could afford it at that time.
Gee. It's sad for someone of your status at that footy club.
Look,
because it's tarnished your memories, hasn't it?
Look, I don't want it all about me, because when I went through as captain, I would get phone calls, and it was only, when you look back at things, at the time you thought they were normal. I'd get phone calls in the States from players saying, "Roosy, look, can you help? I've just bought a house. I can't get money from the club. I've got to go on bridging finance." And bridging finance back there was like 18% or something,
Yeah.
We actually, going into the last season, there was a group of players, and we was going into a NAB Cup game, I don't know what it was called back then, and we were going to boycott the game unless we got a guarantee from the AFL that they would pay us. So all the stories, I first went to Sydney, and my March payment was due, and I thought, oh, geez, because every time, look, I don't want to denigrate Fitzroy. They did as much as they possibly could, but in the circumstances. But I remember ringing up Fitzroy going, "Oh, look, my March payment's due," and they said, "Oh, look, can you wait a week?" And then you'd ring next week, "Can you wait 2 weeks?" So I got to Sydney, and I said to Tammy, "We've got to ring up about my pay again, hope it's a bit better here." And so I rang up and rang the accountant, and I said, "Oh, look, do you know when my money's..." He said, "Oh, have you checked your bank account?" They have these things called direct deposits. Yeah.
So it was there.
It was already there. Yeah, so those things that we thought were normal. So I have so much respect for all that group of Fitzroy players that went through all those years, because it was when you look back on it, at the time, not a drama. But when you look back on it and look what other clubs and other teams and other players were having to put up with, it was dramatically different.
For the record, were you in favour of the plan to merge Fitzroy with the Brisbane Bears?
Yeah, the two components. I was very much in favour of the 86 going to Brisbane, which is well documented. We had a meeting with, I think, Leon Wiegard at the time on the the courts at Wesley, I think it
That's
was.
right, yeah.
And it was, we're going to fold, we could merge with a Melbourne-based club, or we're going to relocate to Brisbane. Purdy and I had met with him, we'd agreed to go. So the first part of it was, and when I look back on now, and it's fine in hindsight, the club should have relocated in '86, which it turned out. Yeah, I think the Brisbane thing was a better model. I think the other option was North Melbourne. I think the Brisbane thing was a better model. And whilst it's not ideal, I saw the Sydney thing firsthand, and and when I went to watch Lynch's first grand final win for Brisbane Lions, and I was working that day, and I was walking back from the MCG, Fitzroy people, well done, Roosy, well done. I thought, I didn't do anything today, but there was still that connection. A lot of people, Fitzroy people, have dropped off.
It still exists, doesn't it?
But it still exists, and I think they've done a really good job to link it. Arthur Wilson does a fantastic job. So they've done the best they possibly can, and they still have some sort of identity.
I know you speak in awe of Gary Wilson and Bernie Quinlan, and there's Lynchy and Gary Pert and Aussie, those blokes you play with. What was the highlight of your time at Fitzroy? No grand finals.
Yeah, the '86 win over Essendon was pretty special.
Yeah. At Waverley.
Waverley. I think
Mickey Conlon.
Mickey Conlon's goal. Someone. It was on television a couple of weeks ago, I think, and someone texted me and said, you got to watch it. And Mickey hadn't had a kick the whole day. And
you got excited that day?
Yeah, I watched it, and the boys watched it and they laughed at me. But that's how exciting it was, because we'd come from nowhere at the end of '86. I think we'd won 5 of our last 6 games, or 6 out of our last 7 games to sneak in the finals. And I remember lining up on the back of the square. One of the Essendon players said to his teammate, just run yourself in for next week. And I sort of thought, gee, I'm not sure you're over the line yet. And then Mickey kicking the goal and the Fitzroy supporters. So that was probably the highlight.
Well, Mickey had hardly touched it that day.
Yeah.
Leon Harris, I think, kicked it to him. Mick sort of steadied up and kicked the goal. I was there. I was because they'd won 2 flags in a row. The Bombers.
They had, and they were primed to go again. Yeah. And then the next week we beat South Melbourne Swans. Bernie had been amazing, I think, in the last quarter of that game. And then we'd run out of steam against Hawthorn in the preliminary final.
Wilson and Quinlan at Fitzroy, Lockett and Kelly in Sydney. You want to separate them or rank them for me?
Probably, who would I take now? It's hard. If you had to take one of those players to start a team, I think probably Bernie separates himself from his body of work in terms of Brownlow medal as a midfielder and a 100-goal kicker. I mean...
and was 6'4".
6'4",
and so athletic, Well, you miffed a bit when, in the Brownlow, when Diesel Williams and Dipper tied, and you were beaten by a vote, and unanimously you were the best player on the ground in the media circles in the last round and didn't get a Brownlow vote. Do you get miffed by that? Do players like you care?
It's funny, because I remember the night, and I remember they left the votes to the last, and then next thing I know, the cameras just swarmed on the table, and 3, 2 and 1 come out. I looked around, they were gone about half a second, But
we're like that.
But I think that's the moment, isn't it? I mean, the moment can be fleeting, can be lasting. That was a fleeting moment. For Diesel and Dipper, it was lasting. You don't dwell on it too much, to be honest.
You don't?
Not really.
I can sum this one up succinctly, Roosy. It's been a brilliant career over 35 years. We love watching you play, and we're all in admiration for what you've done as a coach. Well done, mate.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.